Hello and welcome to another interview episode by Uttering Engineers. My name is Agam, and shockingly, I guess I'm now a third year student. And with me today, we have a new face. We have Amanda, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Amanda. I just joined the Audio Engineers team. I'm going into my second year of chemical engineering and I'm so happy to be your host.
So, Amanda and I have both had the immense pleasure of meeting and speaking with Josh, who is our interviewee for today. Now, Josh graduated from engineering this year in 2021, and what I like most about him is that he carries a message of hope. He carries this message that says that everything's going to be all right. And I know that as I work towards the end of my degree, I've really started to resonate with my own neurosis. I see myself. There's this one poem by Louise Gluck, and one of the lines goes something like, "Surely it's a privilege to approach the end, still believing in something." And while this poem isn't really in the context of finishing a degree, I feel like as I go through the motions of being a student, sometimes this forfeit of hope really takes over. But speaking with Josh has been like a breath of fresh air. And so in this episode, we will be traveling through his journey as a student. We will be hearing about his experiences in the industry, and then eventually arriving at some advice for our listeners. And, I hope it makes for a very interesting episode. But without further delay, Josh, how are you? What are you up to these days?
I'm great. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. That was very flattering. Yeah, it's as you said, I just graduated, and unlike a lot of classmates right now, I was lucky enough to get a job. So I'm working at General Dynamics, which is a kind of military contractor, and I'm working on kind of firmware for network devices that help the military stay in communication with each other.
Before we go any further, we want to know who Josh the student was. So, thinking back on your first year, what was something that led you, what was something you're passionate about that led you into engineering?
Yeah, for sure. I guess the biggest thing that led me into engineering was robotics. I had the opportunity in high school to compete in the first robotics competition. Um, Not many kids get to do that, so I was very lucky to be able to compete. Um, but it kind of gave me a drive that at the time I thought I wanted to go into mechanical engineering, and so that was a drive that I wanted to work on gears and robots. So my idea coming in was I wanted to do an engineer or mechanical engineering degree with mechatronics, and I wanted to go work for a big robotics company and work on the next big robot. My path kind of ended up changing a little bit, but the passion has always kind of been there, and that's definitely what has been guiding me the whole time.
Interesting. What was your first year like at the UFC?
My first year was, I think like a lot of people, it's probably utter chaos. Um, Trying to adapt to all the new courses, and even though a lot of the material is the same, like it's so cramped together, and trying to meet new people and try new things. Um, so I was lucky enough to make a good friend group and support system that we kind of relied on each other. Um, I know a lot of people in COVID didn't really get that, but kind of post COVID, something to look forward to, I guess, is getting together as groups and working through problems, because that's really what engineering is about, is working through problems together.
Yeah. So, as a first year or a second year now, so hard getting used to saying that. We hear a lot about the engineering culture and how big Schulich is when it comes to that. How did you embrace it? Was there something that was shocking to you? Was there something you particularly liked?
Yeah, well, I guess in first year I got involved a little bit. I went on kind of a pub crawl and went to a kegger trying to get into that side of the culture. And I had a lot of fun, and met a lot of really great people, but didn't really delve too much into what engineering culture actually was. I don't think it was really till like third or fourth year where I said, okay, like, what is engineering culture? What does it mean to be a student in this kind of space, and um, enjoy kind of the on campus. I was involved with clubs and stuff before that, but really getting to what does it mean to be a member of Schulich in the way of how do I embrace not only technical sides of things, but also social aspects by participating in things like Frosh Week and Eng Week and all those great events that really aren't always at the forefront because of kind of their bad rap for lots of drinking, but they are a lot of fun, drinking or not. So I'd highly recommend them to anyone.
Sounds good. I'm truly looking forward to embracing or getting to know what that is all about. Okay. Yeah.
That's, really interesting to hear. I think as a student who went through like the pandemic earlier in their degree, I feel a bit of a disconnect from this culture. And I think the only sort of memory I really have is of like during orientation when kids went parading around campus chanting. And that was like, it didn't really compel me to engage in more activities. But I think hearing you, I realized that there really is like space for everyone. And now shifting to the work that we do here in engineering, from our previous conversations, we know that you've been very much involved with many extracurriculars throughout your degree. And something that I've noticed is that there's these competing expectations of like on one hand keeping up with academics, and then on the other hand also demonstrating your skills through side projects for the industry. And I guess some of my confusion that I hope you can address revolves around this feeling of the struggle in finding a balance. So I'm curious, how did you find a balance with your academics and with everything else?
So I guess I found a balance in a bit more of a reverse way of going about things. I kind of focused on the extracurriculars first, and then kind of brought my grades up after that. Um, I realized very quickly in first year that well, I kind of knew this before, but testing and stuff like that were never really my strong suit, and were never gonna get me a job. Um, so like I shifted gears quite quickly, or quite early, I should say, into like side projects and working on stuff like that. Plus, it was just more fun. Like getting to work on robots, like going from a high school where I was building robots 3 times a week, like 3 days a week or something, to university where I all of a sudden couldn't touch robots just seemed completely backwards to me. So just tried to find ways to stay involved in that and keep that passion going. Um, so that's kind of how I started there. And then as I kind of got more used to being a student and learned how I learn best, that's when I really tried to say, well, how can I get my grades up so that I don't fall behind my classmates in the knowledge side of things.
I think, like, just looking back at our previous conversations, I feel like I really appreciate how um, you put this reassuring emphasis on the fact that university is hard, right? Sometimes I see these like toxic positivity posts that are mainly just like simplifying the struggle. Or I see these like gatekeeping esque messages that are like, oh, you shouldn't be here if you think it's harder. It's only going to get harder. So it's just so nice to hear, another student say that, yes, you're in a tough spot right now, but this isn't really your home. And this identity of being a student isn't a resting place. And which is why it's just so much important to take on things that you enjoy and make time for those things outside of academics, outside of schools. And when I think of this theater of adolescence, or the drama of being human and having to figure out everything, I feel like it also comes with a somewhat strict timeline. And I know that engineering, I guess in general, it opens far more doors than it closes. But is there ever a way someone could waste their time in engineering?
That's a very good question. I've seen lots of people say, "Oh, I'm wasting my time," or "If I fail this course, I'm gonna waste my time." But like really, in my opinion, you can't really waste your time because you'll still be learning. Like, as long as you don't, I'd say the only way you could waste your time is if you repeat mistakes you've already made once before, knowing that you're going to make the same mistake again. But making a mistake once and being able to learn and grow from that can never harm you. So, like, taking risks is never a bad thing when it comes to, like, trying to shoot for what you really want in terms of your degree or an activity you want. Like, failing a course once is not going to mean you're not going to graduate. It's just going to take you longer. But that's a learning experience that'll teach you how to grow better as a student and give you kind of priorities on what's important, whether that shows you would really rather be doing the activities and just need to find a way to make the grades come along with it so you don't drop out. But yeah, I don't think you can really waste your time unless you are just repeating mistakes.
So shifting the conversation to your involvement in extracurricular activities, right? You did mention the whole balance that you did it in the reverse. Before going on, what club were you involved in? Why that club? And what do you think you benefited from that club?
So the first club I joined was, well, it was called Tesla at the time, but now it's been rebranded to AC Robotics. And I kind of joined that group because they were having an activity that's called Robot in 3 Days. So that was where we got a competition, and it was the same competition I did in high school. And we would build the robot in 72 hours. And that just like saying to me is, oh, I have to do this. That sounds like so much fun. I don't care if I'm not going to sleep. That sounds like so much fun. Um, and so that's what kind of kickstarted me into going into clubs. And at the end of the Robot in 3 Days, like, I'm the type of person who just stayed and helped pack up, and the people who are running the event just said, hey, you should join us as like a junior executive and get more involved. And of course I said, sure. Um, so it kind of just grew from there a little bit, but sticking around, enjoying, trying to meet people, helping out, and that's kind of how you get pulled in. So yeah, from there, kind of was a junior exec, and then I jumped right to president of that group. And I was president for 2 years. In the second of those years, I rebranded the group to AC Robotics, as Tesla's getting a bit confusing these days. um, so it's been a lot of fun. I don't regret it at all. I've got involved in ZOO, the Student Society for Electrical and Software, since then. Yeah, have no regrets on getting involved in the different groups and with ESS competitions and stuff like that.
So, from your many involvements in extracurricular activities, how do you think current students can benefit from joining clubs?
Yeah. So I think a lot of students these days just think, oh, I need a side project. That's never really what went through my mind. I was never really looking for a side project. I was more looking, how can I actually do something with my hands rather than just sit in the classroom with a pencil, Um, I wanted some way to apply what I was learning, or at least have fun with other like-minded people. And so I think, like, those engineering groups, even the non-technical ones like ESS and the student societies, you can meet a lot of good people, and those connections will stay with you for a while. Like, you could have those connections for years to come. You never know where you're going to meet someone. Um, and like, just growing his communication skills. Like, there's many students who say, oh, I need to focus on the books, but if you go to an interview, you need to know how to talk to someone, and getting through a social evening talking to 60 or 100 different people can really, really help with that. Dealing with people, uh, getting involved with like a student council, so like being a junior exec and then moving on to a vice presidency or a presidency, you can get a lot of experience with how do I have to deal with people and manage this club. Like, that's project management skills right there. You got to deal with kind of how to um, I guess, deal with budget constraints or projects, events, and um, how to deal with the challenges that other people face. Like you're always going to have difference of opinions with someone, but learning how to deal with many different people and different ways people think is can never hurt.
Yeah, that's true. It's so amazing that you mentioned that because I've realized, like, just finishing my first year, I've realized there has been a lot of like push to include more immersive projects in Eng, especially like during the pandemic. We saw more problem-based learning and things like that, and activities to get you more hands-on, right? Despite it all, how do you see the industry being modeled through clubs and courses?
Yeah, so I I guess like in a way the like it's really great the university is doing like bringing those projects in. Like anything you can do to get hands on will help you learn. If not to give you particular skills that you can use in the field, then to give you the tools and problem solving skills you need when you get into the field. Um, to be honest, like when I got into industry or on my internship, like I had to learn so much information. Like school taught me very little of what I actually needed to know, but all the activities through clubs um, and what they're doing with like ILS and stuff like that, um, getting to learn more hands on, that stuff is useful. If not in the way of you can use that direct skill hands on, then at the very least, then knowing how you learn to do physical things rather than just theories.
So going more into detail with the club you're so passionate about, AC Robotics, how different is AC Robotics from other technical clubs and teams on campus? Because I've heard a lot about them. You hear about Solar Car and all the others. How different is AC Robotics?
Yeah, so a lot of the technical teams, people may want to join the technical teams because, like, why? It's just that, right? It's one competition a year, and you're working with a very large team to conquer that project. So I guess the main difference is that AC Robotics kind of focuses on shorter activities or shorter, smaller projects that you can work on a little bit more independently in a lot of ways, or um, at your own pace, or with a smaller group. So you get a little bit more ownership over what you're doing. I know in some of the technical teams, like you might deal with like one tiny little piece of the project rather than getting to see a whole project come to completion in the span of 3 days, even, right? Like that Robot in 3 Days event. So you get a lot more ownership of what you're doing um, without the twice a week, 6 hours commitment, right, that you might get on a technical team.
Yeah. So, reading a little bit about AC Robotics, right? We know it's known for the competitions they hold. What's the importance of having competitive team experiences in your degree?
Yeah, I mean, competitions will never hurt. Like getting involved with things like SEC, which AC Robotics helps run every year. Like usually AC runs senior design. Um, that's like a fantastic way to attempt getting involved, like junior design and senior design, because you're given a problem and you have to solve it. And at the end of the day, you have to pitch whatever it is you built and explain why you did what you did. And that's really what engineering is like, not only just coming up with the problem, but explaining why it was the right solution to the problem. If it's like a time constraint and you're just trying to get through it in time, or you wanted to meet a certain budget or materials constraints, or if you're trying to be innovative and you design something a specific way because you feel it'd be most effective, explaining that is key, or designing it in the first place, I guess, is key. But being able to explain it after, and that's what those competitions do. They force you to do a full cycle of, okay, how am I going to design this? Then how am I going to build this, making sure it can actually be built the way I want it to be built, and then explaining your design choices and communicating that to others.
That sounds like a lot of work, though. But I guess that's why it's so important to get involved in like clubs you enjoy because it's now an opportunity to learn and not just a stamp on your CCR record. So, for someone interested in robotics or wanting that kind of experience that you just said AC Robotics gives you, how can people get involved?
Well, I mean, all the clubs on campus, I think, have social media accounts, and that's a great place to just hear about events. But to be honest, hearing about the events and trying to join online is, well, especially when we get more into post pandemic, just show up at an event, go meet people, encourage your friends to do the same because like sometimes going on your own is kind of hard, but even if your friends won't join you, don't be scared to just go meet people because there will always be someone else who doesn't know anyone else and is just looking for someone to meet. And even if there isn't, the people who are running the events are always looking to help you out. That's why they run the events, to get more people out, to get more people involved. Um, they want to see that, right? So never be scared to just show up or participate in something that sounds interesting. And if it's not interesting at the end of the day, then just don't go anymore. It's as simple as that. But always trying new things. A lot of the groups also have like Discord channels. Like just go and ask questions and talk to people. I know Acer Robotics specifically has a big Discord. Like we have a growing Discord community, and they just work on different projects and ask each other questions on how to design PCBs or how to CAD something. It's actually been really cool to see it build. Um, so that's one way. But AC Robotics, they run the robotics building events. They've run kind of mentorship things and kind of industry panels in the past. And they're working on a new technical project this year to design a like DIY robot dog. So that would be an excellent way to get like more hands on and have a lot of ownership over what you're doing.
Great. Just a last one. So, from our discussions with you, it's so obvious you love robotics. So, this was a club for you. What would you tell someone who might not like be much of a fan of robotics, but here's the events you guys run and thinks, oh, I might be interested in doing that? What do you think? Should they just go ahead and try it out? Do you think your AC Robotics allows room for that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I said earlier, like AC is more built on like shorter events and less time commitment and more ownership, right? So you really get ownership for whatever you do participate in. But if you want to come and take a peek and see what we're about, like they're never gonna say no. They'll always welcome you. Um, and I think a lot of clubs are like that too. But if you don't go, you'll never know for sure if you're gonna like something. So if you're not, to the people who aren't interested in robotics, like I am, then find a club you are interested in. There's lots of cool clubs out there, and especially in the Schulich community. Like there's the soundstage, so you can get involved in like music if that's something you're passionate about, or the student societies, and they do all sorts of like video game nights and, um, well, of course, the drinking events and stuff like that. But just getting involved in something that sounds interesting or sounds fun can really help get through your degree.
Great. So you heard it here first. If you're interested in robotics, AC Robotics may be the club for you. And they are always open to listening to you and giving you a helping hand. So if that's the sort of thing you're interested in, please go over to their Instagram and check it out.
Yeah, thank you so much for talking about the club. I just realized, like, after listening to your answers, that I have a friend that I feel like I should recommend this club to because I know she's looking for a more autonomous position, and she's just so talented. So I think she'd love this club. But it was really nice hearing about it because it seems like a good place to get not only mentorship but work on good projects and then generally just build a sense of community. So thank you, thank you so much for that. Um, yeah, so now transitioning to, I guess, the final stop of our journey, we have some questions around building a career. And so I suppose we can start off kind of on an open note. How different were your expectations of the engineering industry versus what you sort of expected?
Well, I guess what I kind of expected of the engineering industry, at least what I've been told, was it's going to be very rigid. It's going to be kind of boring in some ways. But so far, I haven't found that at all. I don't know if I just got lucky with my team or, well, kind of internship and post grad teams, in which case. But it's been a lot of problem solving. When when you are kind of the person whose job it is to problem solve, it's not so much you have a rigid schedule or a rigid workflow. I mean, some industries might have that. I really couldn't speak to those industries, but at least my experience has been kind of more like, here's a problem now. How are you going to solve it? Like, it hasn't been solved before necessarily. Um, or if it has, maybe this one's slightly different. You got to figure out how to apply that previous solution, or figure out your own new solution and fix previous kind of errors that someone else or maybe you made. So it's a lot of learning. Like, I don't think I've stopped learning my entire internship, and then well, I'm now kind of 2 months into 2.5 months into post grad, and I probably won't ever stop learning, and it's fantastic. I love it, but it's definitely not what I thought. Like, I thought you'd kind of get into the workflow, and then you just kind of get used to always doing that job, always follow a pattern. But so far, it hasn't. It hasn't been that at all.
This fear that you just mentioned, like as a student in software, I'm kind of scared, just as you said, of being in a job where, I show up and then I code for 7 hours and then I go home. But I realize that there's always space for growth, and that because our industries are just like ever evolving, that there's always, I guess, the opportunity to take on different kinds of roles after engineering. And in this case, like there are countless different directions that you can take after you finish engineering. And I suppose right now with the pandemic and online learning, for me, so many of these different directions are starting to seem desirable. And I'm kind of scared that this is only because of the fact that they take me away, like away from being, an exhausted student. And I guess with more freedom comes more uncertainty. And while I have a lot of uncertainty around what I want to do, I probably have even more uncertainty around can I even do anything in an industry that seems to be so competitive. So I'm curious, how did the pieces of the puzzle sort of start to fit for you, or particularly, did you ever question whether you wanted to pursue a career in engineering?
Yeah, for sure. I think I questioned it up until 3 weeks into my post grad job. Um, and that's kind of when things clicked. As yeah, I could probably do this, and while I'll still probably reevaluate. Like, you always got to reevaluate your situation and figure out what you do or do not like. But um, coming into university, I had a backup plan right off the bat. There's first the backup plan, what if I don't get into engineering? And then the backup plan, what if I drop out of engineering? And then kind of once I got far enough into it, it was backup plan of, what do I do if I hate my career in engineering? Like, how can I still use my degree? What are my backup plans? Like, do I go work in IT? One of my previous jobs was at a library, so I was going, well, I liked working at the library a lot. I like that community. What if I just became a librarian? That's a master's program. Um, so, like, just reevaluating what your interests are and what you like doing. But I would say, like, never be scared of the competition. Never be scared of what you might face by trying something that you're currently interested in, because you never know if you're going to like actually doing it until you try it. Um, and going back to that previous question of, like, can you waste time? Like, going through and trying to do what you're wanting to do, because in your case, be it a software engineer, like, you can't waste time. Like, I knew one of the people who I worked with on my internship, she had done mechanical engineering, um, but she had like finished mechanical engineering, worked for 2 years, and figured out she hated it, and went back to school in computer science and became a software developer, and now loves that, right? So sure, it spent a little bit more money, but she doesn't regret her experience of doing mechanical at all. She learned a lot. She got a lot of experiences and met a lot of people working in software post in mechanical post grad. Um, so like, don't be scared to try what you're currently passionate about, and if your interests change, then they change. There's nothing you can do about that now, right? Um, so yeah, kind of figuring out how the pieces go is just, what are you currently interested in? What do you currently want to do? But don't ever let fear of competition stray you from that.
You know, as you mention all of these backup plans that you have, I start to realize that you're also a student that has, I guess, some diverse interests. And then when I think of jobs, I feel as if usually, you know, when you're growing up, you think of it as something that will inform your identity, right? But when you've got all of these different interests, it's hard to know what kind of job will really cater towards, you know, your passions and the things you really want to try out. So I'm curious, could you, I guess, ever imagine yourself being satisfied with a particular job?
Well, I always kind of thought when I was applying post grad, I like submitted applications to some robotics companies, going, well, this is what I really want. I really want to work in robotics. I don't know if I'd be happy anywhere else. Um, and like I said, like, I didn't know I'd be actually satisfied with my work until about 3 weeks in, right? And that's when I kind of realized, it's not necessarily always about what you're doing, but who you're doing it with, and the methodologies behind what you're doing. Because like, my team has been nothing but supportive and been great, great to have around me, and uh, like, having them makes the job so much easier. So I'd rather work with them than with a team that I didn't work so well with, even if that was in a field I did really, really enjoy. Um, because I never really saw myself testing software when I was going through electrical engineering, but my job's been an absolute blast. And I guess it's just been more of solving problems. Like, every day I may be looking at code all day, but for the most part, it's how can I solve this problem? And as long as the problems stay interesting, which they have so far, um, that's all I really needed. So it's not always necessarily about what am I passionate about, what are my interests going to lie in a job. It's more about, what do you as a person want to do for work? At the end of the day, it's a 9 to 5 type of deal, right? And you got all that other time to fill with other passions. Um, I'm still working in the robotics community, trying to get more youth involved, trying to keep alumni of that robotics competition involved in the community. Um, so for me, that's where I get the robotics passion now. Um, and then you have all sorts of other time on top of that for vacations and traveling, and kind of different fitness ideas. Like, you can do I got into climbing and biking and stuff like that, right? So it's just at the end of the day, it's not your identity. A job is not your identity. It's a job. And as long as a job is interesting and rewarding, that may be all you need.
Wow, Josh, you keep inspiring us. Meeting you the second time, and I know I'm definitely taking so much with me. So, looking back on your entire experience, very diverse and very unique, is there anything you would want to tell your younger self, or one thing that you know now that you wish you had known sooner?
Um, that's kind of as we talked about this earlier, but like, that's a very challenging question, because like, I don't have a ton of regrets, and like, I don't think anything I've done has really, again, like, wasted my time. So like, I'm not sure there's anything I would necessarily tell my younger self, other than maybe sleep a little less in class, because I did that a lot. I think it probably could have helped me if I slept at home rather than in the classroom. But at the end of the day, I got through it, and I learned from whatever mistakes I made. I guess I wish I'd known a little bit more about engineering culture early on, so that wasn't only in third and fourth year I got involved. Um, so get involved and follow your interests, and you won't really have any regrets.
Great, that's amazing to hear, especially being still so early in my degree. So yeah, that's great to hear. Um, Before we end, would you like to plug anything? Any shout outs you want to give?
Yes, I guess well, I already shouted out to AC Robotics a little bit, but as I mentioned, I'm kind of working on growing the first robotics community in Canada and the rest, or I guess in Alberta. So if there's any kind of first alumni out there in the Schulich community or beyond that, please reach out. You can reach out to me, or you can just go to AC Robotics and they'll point you my way. Um, yeah, I'd love to get to meet you guys and kind of build this community.
Thank you so much, Josh. It's been amazing hearing from you today. It's great to hear your unique story, talking about your experience as an Eng student at the UFC, to how different it was from your career to everything. It was just amazing hearing from you. And I think my biggest takeaway today is just to get involved, to know that yeah, you're in a hard place, but that's fine, you're not staying there, right? And also the amazing benefits that comes with joining a club. I know for sure I'm going to check out AC Robotics. Maybe not join, but check it out. So if you're like me, please go check out AC Robotics as well. And if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And also the alumni, Josh is looking for you. So thank you all so much for listening to our episode, and until next time, goodbye.